Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to Away and Awake. This is a bit of an experimental thing tonight. I don't have a particular plan as to why I'm doing this video, what it's going to be about, and I've just started the video recording very impromptu. I don't have anything scripted as such, so we're going to see how this goes. It's a bit of an experiment in avoiding the typical problem that trying to create anything at all, there's these massive emotional and mental barriers that I put up around how perfect it has to be and how planned it has to be and how ready I have to be before taking action. And so I was wanting to challenge that a little bit here. I've got my finger on the pause button for those times where I will inevitably find myself running short of proper consciousness of what the hell I'm saying. I don't have very much experience with this yet, so I don't know very much about video editing, and I find it very frustrating when I try, and so rather than try to edit later on, I think I'll just pause here and there. So I've got my browser open on screen in case we need that. I think I'm just going to probably talk a little bit about some stuff that's been going on this week and some dream related stuff. If you're new to the channel, which you probably are, the channel is at base about the, I suppose, not interpretation, but dissemination or discussion of very complex non-ordinary dream states and other substance-induced non-ordinary states of consciousness, but primarily dreams at this point. And this is because I've had a very complex dream life over the last decade with some very, very deeply non-ordinary dream states. And what that means is not just dreams that have unusual content or unusual themes, but dreams that really do induce an altered state of consciousness. And so there will be some very indescribable. I'm just pausing because I'm remembering that I've got something on the oven over here, so on the stove. So give me 1 second. Welcome to my extremely professional YouTube channel. So I was saying these non-ordinary dreams. So there'll be there's a range of characteristics, and I probably couldn't enumerate them all, but there's some very common ones are things like strange effects with time, so distortions of time, the apparent appearance or presence of other conscious entities, whether that's other beings in the space or other parts within yourself or certain kind of global conscious agents that emerge. Synesthetic experience is one way to catch a lot of it. So senses doing strange things, very conceptually complex in a much more profound way than typical dreams are. Physical sensations, so overtly feeling things happen to you, often things that aren't physically possible. So for example, I've had a number of dreams where my body undergoes these kind of transformations, I guess, where, for example, my arms might meet like this and then slide into each other, and I feel all of that occurring, and a whole host of otherworldly physical phenomena. So there's lots of these different things. I probably should actually formulate a real list that tries to spell them all out. But they are in some sense, they're akin to psychedelic experience, but they also, I think, probably have their own uniqueness to them as well. And in some sense, probably certain aspects of them, I think, are more intense than psychedelic experiences that I've had. but there's definitely a crossover, and we're talking about something vaguely in the same space. And where's that pause button? So yeah, that's what the channel is kind of grounded in. But it also, I hope that it will become a place where I can discuss and we can discuss, and there's a community around a lot of stuff that kind of is which is associated with dreams and with the kinds of deep spiritual states that I'm talking about. So this, will involve discussions of psychedelics, discussions of other non-ordinary states, discussions of mental health and mental illness. Artificial intelligence, I think, is a really fascinating area on many, many, many fronts, and one of them, I believe, is the insights that it will actually provide us into understanding what we even mean by consciousness and how our minds operate and our bodies. So a range of these other topics, and they're all very important topics to me and very personal topics to me. I have a lot of experience with these non-ordinary states, and I have a lot of experience with mental illness in the form of depression and anxiety, and some very strange sleep-related stuff that's not specifically to do with dreams, but which I think is probably responsible for inducing a lot of the unusual dream states that I've had in the last decade. I'm just going to check that stove. Okay, so that should be the last interruption there. And this is why I would prefer to structure my videos, because now I lose the reason why I was telling you all of that. But I think it had to do with the fact that I have a lot of barriers to making content, and they seem to proliferate. For some reason I cannot pronounce words tonight. I think it's because my nose is partially blocked, and so the air's doing weird things in the back of my throat. But I guess I'll just start wherever I think I am, or what comes to mind. And it's been an interesting week. We're Thursday now, and it's October 2023, and a couple of really, I suppose, important things have occurred this week. One is that where do I start? So one is that Roland Griffiths passed away, and Roland Griffiths, for those who don't know, is considered to be one of the real pioneers in the area of psychedelic research, notable for having relaunched, been the first person to engage in psychedelic research, I think in 1999, after a long hiatus in psychedelic research, I think a couple of decades, maybe not quite that long, but brought about by the legal complications of studying the compounds after the 80s. And so he is known for having relaunched some of this research in the late 90s, and of course nowadays psychedelics are very much at the forefront of potential pharmaceutical interventions into mental health conditions and some other issues. And an incredible man in his mid-70s. He was diagnosed around about this time last year, maybe a little earlier actually, but I think it was last year that he was diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer, and he has just passed away. And I think it's a very poignant moment, and it's not often for me that someone passes away in the public eye that is that significant to me. I'm not the most common people you hear about are musicians, that kind of thing, actors, but that's never been that close to my experience, especially music. I don't have a deep relationship with particular musicians, so for someone like him to pass away. Even though I've not been exposed to that much of him, I've listened to him speak a few times and whatnot. But just as a concept, it's a poignant moment for him to be passing, and a beautiful moment as well, because his last year or two of life were spent, from what I understand from listening to him speak about it, really processing his diagnosis and his impending passing in a very beautiful way, him and his family and others. And until the end, it was a true advocate for the psychedelic cause, beyond just as a treatment for mental health conditions, and into this the broader space of psychedelics as a cultural tool for all people and for all of society, to potentially help to steer us in some more positive directions. He had a very beautiful approach to how he approached a very beautiful approach to these medicines and to the spiritual process of it. A very scientific man with a very spiritual heart, which is very beautiful and sometimes it seems quite rare. So that occurred. I was also introduced to a musician named Ren, and many of you hopefully will have heard of him. He's becoming increasingly well known, and he deserves to be very well known. I had never heard of him until this week, and it's a year on since he released the video which I was introduced to. And if you know Ren, then you'll know this video. It's called Hi Ren. It's a song that he produced, and it is a 10-minute tour de force from a musical and a spiritual and a poetic point of view and performance point of view. It is honestly one of the greatest things you'll ever see. If you haven't seen it, then do check it out. Hi Ren, R-E-N. And the subject matter is very much in a way what I kind of started this video talking about, of these barriers that are created within ourselves by this apparent kind of demonic force, this part of ourselves that just doesn't want us to succeed, that is determined to hold us down, to hold us back, to talk down to us, to constrain us, to berate, to belittle, that is adamant that we not engage in those things that we feel called to engage in, that gives us all the reasons why we shouldn't, and can be very, very aggressive in its affect. I think more for some people than others, and I think in the case of mental illness, often that is a very strong voice. And it seems clearly within the creative space, so amongst artistic people, there seems to be a strong resonance with that. And it's certainly something that I experience when it comes to pretty much everything that I do. And I do manage to achieve some things. However, a great deal of my time is spent in a very unhappy dialogue with this inner critic. So that's happened, and it's been a very inspirational moment for me just to see this inner dynamic recognized and articulated in such a profoundly incisive way, and performed in such an artistic and musically beautiful way. And I think even more so in the fact that his music combines, this is primarily rap, although he does quite a bit in his musical life. But I think rap is a very interesting vehicle for this kind of thing, and particularly being someone that's very interested in language and wordplay and this very detailed use of language. That really appeals to me. Really fast paced. There's rhythm going on. There's lots of patterns going on, which I guess would sum it up for me as to how my brain tends to respond to the world. And to see, and also that he's talking about it not only in the abstract, but in the context of his own life and his own struggles with illness, mental illness and physical illness. So I feel as if that's given me a really interesting focal point, a really interesting exemplar to come back to remind myself. And what's so amazing is it's not just, you know, a dot list of things on a piece of paper that feels inspiring when you write it, but when you come back to it in the wrong mood, it's just nonsense. This is this like immersive piece of theatre that really, it's hard. I feel like I'll never listen to that song and feel as if it's meaningless. So I guess they're the two kind of main events that have occurred, and there's also been a couple of interesting dreams, and they're by no means the full firework displays of dreams that I have had, but they had, I think, very interesting emotional significance. What I tend to do on this channel, or what I've intended to make of this channel moving forward, has been focused on taking. So over a period of many years, I've had some very complex dreams, and I've recorded them with voice while I'm lying in bed, and then some of them I've then written out. Some of them I've still got to do, and some of the more interesting of them and the more detailed I've then tried to flesh out in more formal writing. And the aim is to describe what happens in the dream. So both the content of the dream and the various sensations that I have emotionally and physically and so forth. It's not about interpreting the dream and figuring out what it tells me about my life outside of the dream. I think that's the wrong way to approach dream analysis, at least for me and at least for this style of dream. It's just about, on account of how complex the state is, it's really an exercise for myself in saying, okay, there's 1,000 dimensions of sensation here. I'm never going to be able to articulate that all, but what can I start to tease out a little bit, just to give myself some grounding in what was going on there. So I'll take these important dreams and try to flesh them out in this way into a more formalized style of writing, because dreams are hard, because on the one hand, it's not often that someone's going to get excited about you telling them about a dream, because dreams tend to be very difficult to describe and very woolly, and so it's not that satisfying for the person listening. Often it's not necessarily that satisfying for you as the speaker, because you can see that you're not being able to get at what was going on. These dreams are a little different on a few angles. One is that the content is inherently profoundly interesting, and I think most people that I've shared some of these dreams with really do appreciate it. And two is they tend, the ones that I'm able to kind of flesh out as well as I do, are the ones that really have a very high level of detail about them. So it's not this wishy-washy thing. There might be some bits and pieces here and there that aren't quite clear, or that need some kind of loose language, but there's a very, very clear recall, and often they're very long, so they become these epic kind of tomes. Well, I say that, I'm not being too grand about it. I don't know that my language would justify the use of the word tome or epic, but they're big pieces of writing sometimes. So I've thought it's important to write them in a detailed way, because if I don't, it's just not going to be interesting to listen to, and it's not going to convey anything of what I really would like to try to convey about them, because what I really like to get out is their depth, and their depth requires a detailed kind of analysis, a detailed period of thinking about what was actually happening, and then trying to find the right words rather than just loosely explaining it and thinking that's going to be satisfying to me. And so, but one of the problems this creates for me is that when it comes to thinking about creating something for the channel, I do have quite a few that have already been written out, and so it would just be a matter of recording them. But I also, really want to be getting to more of these other dreams that haven't been properly written out yet, many of which I will have forgotten, except that I've got them written down somewhere. And to write those out properly. But it's quite a high barrier to get started with that. It's a difficult task. I'm often in very low energy, often depressed, and the idea of posting them on YouTube isn't all that great a motivation, because one, at this point, nobody's following, and two, there's a certain, I suppose, vulnerability in it, and when someone does chance upon these videos, there's that voice in me tells me, well, as if they're going to find this interesting at all. Just noticing that my glasses aren't too reflective. Okay. So it's difficult to muster the resources to want to write these dreams out. At the moment, I'm particularly, when I think of doing it, I'm just particularly put off by just a sense that I just don't have adequate vocabulary, and I don't have adequate writing skills. Anyway, and these are all reasons that are partially valid but aren't ultimately, and I will get there, and one does tend to demonstrate to oneself when you find that energy that actually it's nowhere near as impenetrable as it seemed. But I thought what I would do here, how have I got a timer here? 23 minutes into the video, is just, rather than this whole laborious process of fleshing out a dream in formal writing, I'll just talk about a couple of dreams. They're fairly short dreams, very emotionally dense dreams. As I say, not a lot of fireworks. And I do this with the caveat that I do feel as if eventually these dreams themselves I should write up and perhaps do a formal recording of, so that I can try to tease out in a more nuanced way what's going on. But I'm just going to experiment with the idea that they might nonetheless be interesting just in a casual discussion like this. And perhaps people out there, you may be able to relate to this kind of dream, or the sensations that are involved. I would say these are not, I wouldn't classify these as kind of non-ordinary state dreams. No, not at all actually. But they are dreams that involve very deep states of emotional content, and so from a feeling point of view, while they're occurring, they're very, very strong. I find that most of my strong emotional experience in the world does occur in dreams, and I suppose in some sense I feel as if my dreams are my brain's way of continuing to experience deep emotion in the absence of deep emotion during waking life that's been brought about by various kind of mental illness factors. And in my more poetic moments, it feels as if it's a beautiful reminder to myself that my brain is not incapable of feeling these things. It just, for whatever reason right now and for quite a long time, but for now, in the waking world, it tends not to go there, but it can go there, and it does so at night time. It's a mixed blessing, that, because one of the great frustrations with dreams is how difficult they are to share, and that they can't ultimately be shared in any direct kind of way with other people. They are, by definition, a solo activity, and it feels as if that level of emotion, when felt in the waking world, is something that you can actually share more tangibly with other people. So these dreams, one was just an overt nightmare, and one was not. It had painful elements, but was not a nightmare. So we'll start with the nightmare, and a very simple setup. I was lying on a double bed in the corner of a room that I had as a child, and I was faced towards the wall where the corner was on my side, and the dream was dividing its perspective between me as the person lying in the bed and me as the dreamer watching the scene. So that kind of confusing vibe, but there was a sense that the door in the room was open. My eyes were more or less closed, so I wasn't seeing things from the point of view of the person in the bed, but I was, from the dreamer. I had a visual on the room, and the door was open, and it was dark, just grey light, quite eerie and cool in the sense of cold. And I became aware of somebody entering the room. I was thinking about this earlier, and I was inclined initially just to use the word that they were creeping into the room. But actually, it wasn't a creep. It was as if they were just gliding very slowly into the room, almost as if they weren't moving their legs at all. So they weren't actively creeping. They weren't choosing to creep. It was just the way that their natural way of movement was very slow, very steady, and to just merge into the space. And the emotional sensation of this occurring was very frightening and very vulnerable. And I felt them come into the room and along the side of the bed to stand behind me, with me looking away. And I was basically telling myself that it must be my dad. It felt very, very scary, but I thought it must be him. It has to be him. And if I just pretend to be asleep, he'll understand that he needs to leave, that I'm not engaging, I'm not awake, there's no need for him to be here. And that even if he might think that I'm pretending to be asleep, he'll recognize that my desire to be seen as asleep is the reason why he should leave. It doesn't matter whether I'm genuinely asleep. And if I'm putting it on, that's all the more reason why there must be something going on that he doesn't want me here, so I'll leave the room now. But that didn't occur. The energy of that person remained behind me, and my energy is becoming increasingly panicked and short of breath and constrained. And at some point, I don't remember when this occurred, but I know that it did because of where it went eventually in the dream. But at some point, they lay down on the bed next to me, facing in the same direction as me. Both of us facing the wall. They weren't touching me, they were just lying there. And I continued with this inner battle. The emotional state I was in at this point was extremely raw, but there was this mental battle of this has to be Dad. I'm just going to continue to pretend to be asleep. He must have missed it before, but now he would see that I'm asleep, I'm not responding, and he will leave. And he wasn't. And just go to the pause button. So somewhere around this point, it became too overwhelming, and so I started to try to scream or to vocalize in some way. And it was that classic paralysis thing that goes on in dreams where you try but you can't, you try to run but you can't, you try to scream but you can't. And so I felt it very powerfully, all of this energy kind of pooling up in my head, all of the muscles in my face and my neck and my head doing the thing that you do to make noise, and yet my mouth being unable to open. And it's almost as if my kind of face was kind of exploding out inside without being able to get out. And of course that tension of that feeds itself and feeds the desire to scream, and so it kind of escalates very quickly. And eventually, I don't know exactly what was going through my mind, but I made the decision that I would turn over. That I would turn over to face this person, still in some kind of weird state of being convinced that it must just be Dad. But at this point, even that wasn't a good outcome, because there was very much a sense of, well, if this is Dad, the torment that's how he could be behaving, that he could be so, well, it's not even a question of him being oblivious to my energy, because that was impossible. So in fact, the only option was that he was deliberately intruding on my energy, knowing full well that I wanted to be left alone, and in some malicious way deciding not to leave me alone. And so I turn, and when I see the person, it's not Dad, and it's this person whose face is that of a human, but just wrong enough to be almost like a very well designed horror character who almost looks human but not quite enough, and so has this incredible sense of fear about it. And it was a male, short, in the grey light, with a kind of, it feels like a kind of jaundiced, kind of grey jaundiced look on his face, in his skin. Short hair, not quite right. And he wasn't looking at me. I feel like he was looking down, kind of in the direction of my chest, in a blank, unpresent kind of way. Still, no movement, no sound, no affect. Well, there was an affect, but it was more characterized by blankness, a kind of psychopathic distance. It was as if there was some intention to cause me torment, to cause me to suffer, to intrude on my boundaries, but that he didn't need to do anything, and he knew that he'd found his place, and he knew that just lying there, looking blankly into nowhere, was all that was needed for me to be completely overpowered by him. There we go. That's the dream. I think at some point then I woke up. I don't know if I then, the scream energy, sometimes I think what happens is that the tension becomes so strong, it overrides your sleep states. That when you're asleep, your body becomes disconnected from your motor functions, become disconnected. I think it overrides that, and so the motor functions come online, and all this energy that's trying to get a scream out is really strongly felt in the body, and movement occurs, and it breaks you into waking reality. It might feel weird to be smiling at that. I feel like it's a very intense dream. I actually feel quite pleased with the way I described that. I thought that was okay. Hopefully that was interesting to listen to, and I'm aware that some of the dynamics in that dream are common, and so hopefully some people listening will be able to relate in some way. I'm just going to pause for a second. Wow. Okay, so what I had on the stove before was rhubarb. So I've been stewing some rhubarb. I thought in order to try to incentivize me to make my porridge, I would make some amazing rhubarb to go with it, and holy cow, it's good. I thought it was going to be one of those things like poaching eggs, where it all sounds easy on paper, but then when you try to do it, it doesn't work. But it was an absolute doddle. So if you've ever thought about it, just look it up and do it. It takes 10 minutes, and then it's just delicious. It does require an enormous amount of sugar, but yeah. So I think that dream there will be a candidate for writing in a more formal way. There wasn't a lot going on in terms of events or trans-dimensional psychedelic craziness, but it'd be interesting to try to just tease out some more language around those emotions, around that coercive dynamic that was going on between that entity and me. It's curious that it was in that bedroom. The bedroom setup was different to what it was in real life, but it was very much the bedroom that I spent most of my childhood in. So I'm tempted not to go with the second dream on account of the length of this video at this point. Perhaps I might stop there. Yeah, look, I think I'll do that. I don't want to overdo it. So if you're interested to hear about it, then watch this space. Hopefully sometime soon I'll get that up. I'm reluctant to do the classic like, comment and subscribe line. I always find that very, jarring to hear people say. But by all means, if you do want to hear the next one, then subscribing might be the way to remind yourself. Unless you're like me, when you subscribe to about 1,000 YouTube channels, and then it becomes a little bit more complicated to keep up to date with things. Thanks very much for listening as far as you did, and awayandawake.com is where you'll find the current kind of log of some of the formal writings that I've done on dreams, but also some poetry and some other stuff. The channel here has a number of videos. There's not that many so far, but if you're interested in some much more embellished dream descriptions of some very, very complex dreams, then there's a few that you can listen to. Feedback is very much appreciated. If there's something about the way that I'm doing things that you like or don't like, or ideas you have, or dreams of your own that you'd like to talk about or share, then it's all welcome. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.